Okay, guys, today we are back with the Coach Trap podcast. This week, we are very lucky to be joined by Roberto, who's going to tell us all about coaching with Roberto. But before we dive in, I just want to remind you 90% of coaches quit or fail, only 10% make it. So, to give yourself the greatest opportunity to make it, click the subscribe button and let's dive in. Roberto, thank you so much for joining us. I'd love to know a little bit more about you, a little bit more about you, your journey into this space. Let's dive in.
Hi everyone. Yeah, what the journey was pretty much straightforward. I started professionally into training and mentoring for a very, very long time. And over a period of time, I realized that training was flat. Mentoring could be a solution, but not an effective solution. And I went into coaching. I wanted to go into coaching for a while, and I decided to join a course in London, which was roughly about 3 to 4 weeks worth of a course. The thing that really got me into coaching, it was the result of that course, because sets of people came in, wanted to be coached, and I think this is related to what you just said about the people not succeeding, all sorts of life, nothing coherent about the group of people that we were together, different visions, and all of a sudden you have your teacher that says, it's okay now, you've done 5 hours, so you can go and coach now. And I was like, what? I mean, do we actually understand that you sit in front of someone else and you give them your time and you're trying to be as valued to their journey, their life, whatever issues they might have. And you can do that within 5 hours just because you know what to use clean language on how to use perceptual position. That got me going really mad, to the point it motivated me. And I said, no, I want to know more. So I went in and I did about 15 other coaching courses in all different fields. And through the process, personally, I've learned so much about myself that, I mean, it's sometimes really tough, because every single courses I took it upon myself to do it within myself and see whether it was related to me. And I wanted to find something that really kind of spoke to me. That was really something that said, well, if I were one day to do this, I had to sit in front of a client or whatever and feel capable, valued, and feel sure about myself that my support could really make a difference to that person, then it has to be something that I believe in. And it's not about being a coach for everybody. It's not about, go out there and just wow with words and have your sessions like a doctor, and then whatever happens, you get another person in, and here we go again. Same sort of modules, same sort of techniques, same sort of discussions, and every single problem seems to be standardized. And I didn't want to be them, and I didn't want to do that. And so basically, I also been a fan and an observer on the manosphere, because I have a son, which is 23. And I want to discover a little bit more what goes in the heads of kids of their age. And I discovered that there is a huge issues with guys today, with men today. There is a huge issue with the way we see the world. The way the world is a dangerous place for a man. And I went to do a union. That was the first. Carl Jung is actually, I live in Switzerland, so it's from Switzerland, from Zurich, and he went through so the masculinity coach, masculinity in general, archetypes, and so on and so forth. And it was then that the sparkle. It was an amazing sparkle. I just thought to myself, I found my calling. This is it. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to go into. This is what I want to dive into. So that's that.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Dan Williams, I think this is a match made in heaven for today, isn't it? There's a lot that we talk about there in the coach trap. Actually, if you try to appeal to everyone, you talk to no one, right? So actually, you need to narrow it down. And it's interesting, some of the philosophies that you talked about, there's a direct crossover to what we talk about. But I'd love to know a little bit more about the Carl Jung philosophy. What inspired you with that? So when I see that, my perception, the way that I see it is using. I was going to say using your darkness as no, using your darkness as a strength. I don't think that's quite it, is it? Using your darkness to inspire others by using it as a wisdom. Talk me through how you found out about Carl Jung, why that inspired you, and maybe I know I butchered that last message. Talk me, how would you put your spin on that at the end?
Yeah. I mean, Carl Jung was the beginning. Let me tell you a little bit about this guy. This guy's brilliant. Actually, he was a student of Freud. Freud, sex therapist of the years, and they would still think that everything is about sex. Actually, Carl went even one step further. And what is great about Carl Jung is a few. It's quite a lot of things. First of all, there is the archetypes, 12 archetypes, which is the different phases of our life. In general, these are divided into four sets, which is the beginning, the middle, towards the maturity, and then obviously wisdom to the end. And you define this as the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover as a three different typology, almost, if you will, four sets of character that we hold within us. But there is much more to that. There is the collective subconscious, the fact that the world seems to be relatable in certain rituals, in certain beliefs. It doesn't matter where you go in the world, they have the same sort of stories, they have the same sort of history background meets. All these are very much the same wherever you go. Changes languages, it might change the look and feel about it, but it's actually the same. There is the other thing that you talk about, the dark side of it is actually the shadows. And this is probably the things that got me going because I realized I had so many dark shadows and I had no idea what they were. So basically, when we are born, we have 3 years of our life where we are formed. And I wish I knew this before I had my two kids. And that 3 years, right, they are the one that will set everything else that will happen in terms of you as a human being for the rest of your life. So the love and of your mother, the presence of the mother, the presence of the father, uh, or vice versa. Living the two polarities as well. In a good sense, it works very well, but there is also the dark sense if it doesn't work very well. If you don't have a mother, if you have an abusive mother, if you have an abusive father, if you have an absent father, so that. And then the next 3 to 4 years to five, it's formed by what society around the family has, and you develop the persona, and the persona is what your parents want you to be, what society wants you to be, what's good to be to succeed in society, how the relationship relatable with your peers, with other friends, all of these are forming yourself throughout your life. But at the same time, what happened is that by forming it, that means there's a part of you that you push down and these are the shadows. And the more you push them down, the more you actually forget about them, the biggest they become inside yourself. And they normally don't manifest like I have a sense of imposter syndrome. And you just think, okay, this is because I don't know, how to do this job. And I got myself into this job and I don't know what to do. And therefore I have this feeling. What am I here for? Am I valued in this position? And then you realize effectively that imposter syndrome is nothing more than the fact that perhaps you had a situation with your father where you felt that you were not valued enough. And that's how the imposter syndrome from where you didn't even speak, to today in your life over the years, that would affect you. These shadows they have, like you rightly said, they have a huge energy. If you be kind, you be aware, you accept, and you live with that. But on the other side, if you push them down and you choose to ignore them and you choose to sort of forget about them, the results, it's really schizophrenic because it might be violence in a relationship. It could be abuse, drug abuse, or any abuse. I mean, it could be going to the gym and abuse, if you just go every single day. It could affect the way you look, relate to other peers. It could affect the way you feel about yourself. But it manifests in this because men are very motivational, active humans. So they don't necessarily say, oh, why is this happening to me? No, I just get into it. I do it. We are doers as opposed to women. So the doers thing makes us do things which are a result and manifestation of something that is deep inside ourselves. And we kind of, if we don't really know where it is and what it is, then we manifest it most of the time in the really wrong way and has a huge effect on our lives. And Jung also talks about, the animus, the animal, that's the polarities in ourselves, the female part, the male part. It talks about how our life evolves over a period of time. And of course, when Jung wrote it, he wrote it for both men and women. But for men, it's much more relevant for me because the issue with men, with us, has always been that we have never really learned how to talk, how to state our freedom, how to state our needs, how we impose what we want to do. In a relationship, for example, we tend to say always yes and less no. We don't want the arguments, so we let it go. And this creates deep inside, feeds the shadow, feeds the dissatisfaction that then manifests in something quite big once it explodes. Because when we explode, we explode. We keep up. We tend to defend our corners. We tend to defend our family over a period of time. But when the situation becomes unbearable, then the crisis becomes. And it's quite dramatic. In most guys, to a certain age, it becomes unbearable because they don't know what's happening to them. They have no idea um, that this is a result of the shadows. So it's a little bit how I interpret it anyway.
Yeah, love that. The shadows are such a great way to say it. There's so many ways that we can go with this. In terms of me, I recognize a lot of that in the attachment style work that I do in my relationship sort of coaching, right? How it affects men, how men don't quite have the communication skills because we're all a product of our environment, right? So that's how I would see it. But Dan, I've got a great question for you, right? You actually see a lot of the manosphere in the work that you do on X, in the way that you go about this sort of stuff, right? The age that you are, where are people looking, talking about this stuff? I don't think it's LinkedIn, is it? So talk to me because obviously there is a space for this, right? Where men are looking for answers, they're searching, they're interacting, they're in groups, they're looking at role models, right? Where does this take place then?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think LinkedIn is probably one of the most like suppressed places ever. Like you don't get people being themselves whatsoever at all on LinkedIn.
No.
Twitter is an interesting one. I think a lot of the things on Twitter are quite controversial, quite extreme, because they want to get those clicks, and they're intentionally extreme more so than they actually feel, which can be interesting when you're scrolling through. You got so many extreme opinions. It's kind of crazy that people kind of just don't want to scroll it anymore. But for sure, they are searching for things related to the manosphere on Twitter more so than LinkedIn. I wouldn't say anyone is worried about that on LinkedIn whatsoever. They were worried about more their self-image, how they're going to come across, rather than what's actually going on deeper. So yeah,
Yeah.
Twitter, interesting.
I mean, by my manosphere education, which is absolutely incredible, because when we talk about manosphere, by the way, there is the positive side of it, the middle side of it, and there is the toxic. And then the toxic side of it is just, I mean, it's another world. But the positive side of it, I think in YouTube, it's just crazy because you have a lot of people just following up, some key, actually, there's three main YouTuber that I follow. I'm not going to say the name or anything like that because absolutely humongous. And they do tend to talk a lot about, how do men feel? How do men feel compared to women, especially after the Me Too movements? How do men feel when, we have to be strong, we have to be providers, and we used to be strong, we used to be provider, we used to be the head of, we used to make decision, and today that role is gone. I mean, we have more women taking decisions, we have equal opportunity in the relationship in the workplace. We have been when I say castrated, it sounds like I'm starting to become toxic. I don't want to become toxic. But in a way, psychologically castrated because, before, you used to be able to be cool at work and trying to be a little bit charming. And today in your mind, it's like, hold on, I have to be careful. I have to be careful. I don't know how this will be perceived. I don't know what that will mean for me. So there's all of this things that happen professionally that has completely stopped that sense of liberty. And of course, let's not forget the Me Too movement. It's a real thing. It's a terrible thing. We should never really be, sort of accepting that kind of behavior. But at the same time, the chase, the feeling man, the feeling virile, the whole charming of being romantic towards somebody that you like and you fancy. Today, it's not possible to do it at the workplace. So all of this creates a huge responsibility. And whereas we form it, do you remember when I said about the persona? We're forming ourselves. We've been forming men because of the Me Too movements, because we've been telling them now, you can't do this, you can't say this, you can't portray masculinity, you can't portray strength. And all of a sudden, we have young men at the age of 12, 13, and 14 that they start to think, okay, well, I want to go to the gym. I don't want to talk to women. Women needs to be abused. And this is the toxic part of the manosphere, which is absolutely huge, huge, because it's such a young age to have that problem. And you think, what would that be in a few years to come when they're faced with the reality that a YouTube clicks, like Dan said, it might be today that you have the success of it, but it's not guaranteed that in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years time, you will still be relevant to a group of people. So what are you going to do when you're stuck in the middle of nowhere and you haven't done anything to work on yourself? So, yeah.
Love, I love that. We are so aligned, maybe slightly different angles, but so aligned. It's really interesting you talk about the YouTubers that you think are putting a positive message out, because there's so many, isn't there, that are blaring out this manosphere rubbish. If you have 5 minutes, check out an Instagram account called Baller Busters. It's incredible, right? And it will show all these coaches that we are anti. And if you look at what that is, they are all massive in that manosphere, if that
Yeah.
makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
Exactly what we try not to be, which is interesting. Dan, I'm going to bring this back to you, I would say. And Roberto, I'd love to know your twist on that. Roberto, me and you grew up in a world without the internet, right? I remember when when internet was still broadband and dial up, right? I remember having phones without internet on, right? I remember not having social media until I was maybe in my early 20s, no,
How
late
old?
teens.
How old?
I'm
I'm
39.
19.
So no. So I remember having no. So I remember Wi-Fi. I remember having my first phone. I remember living in a world without internet, right? And none of this existed, Dan. This wasn't a thing. There was no Andrew Tates. There was no Andy Elliott's.
Yeah.
They didn't exist, right? So Roberto, so that's a question maybe for, we can look at this on both sides, right? So Roberto, do you think this has got worse, right? Just before I hand it to you, I'm going to hand it to Dan. Where do you, Dan, do you, obviously this is all you know, isn't it, in terms of your age group, right? And the reason that inspired Roberto is watching what the manosphere did to his kids, right, is this space. So talk me through it. Where's this I'd love to know even more, go even deeper on this. What's the negative sides on this, or talk to me a bit more about the space, because what comes to mind for me is Reddit, people looking to voice their problems. On Instagram, I think you see people instantly negatively putting out the manosphere, right? But then Roberto's talking about YouTube being a great space to look for inspiration, but there's also going to be the negative spin on that. So what's your spin on that, Dan? Is the internet a good thing for this, a bad thing for this? Is where future?
Yeah, I mean, it's up for debate, but I think what they do a really good job of is calling out like what problems these like teenagers are having, and that like the masculinity kind of thing that Roberta was talking about. But it's just a case of the solution is not the right solution. It's kind of the opposite to the right solution. So if Roberto could call out the same kind of issues in the same way, obviously without being as like extreme, and tell, well, actually, there's a different way to approach it. There's a different way to solve the problem. Then it could be a huge, huge thing. The Roberto sphere, maybe. Who knows?
No, no. I'm not a messiah. I don't pretend to actually make a huge difference, but I will make it in my own. I think it's great what you just said, Greg, and Dan is to the point. First of all, I think that there is as a coach, and again, this is my calling, because then I did another 3 courses in embodiment, in shadow, and in masculinity coach, which I think are very relevant to the great sort of educations that Jung gave me, because I wish I met him. I mean, he's no longer alive, of course, but he must have been an extremely talented and amazing person to talk to. But the thing is that there will be a time as a coach that you have to look at yourself and just say to yourself, how authentic I can be. How authentic is my message? How authentic is my method? How authentic is what I am? What difference will I make to this world? What is my signature? And the mistake sometimes, and again, I repeat, this is my opinion, so don't think that I am an expert, 100% expert of many years experience. That's not the same as the success that Craig has had. Is that, but the mistake that we make is that we want to be the coach for all, because we need to get money, because we need to get popular, because we need to get this and we need to get that, and we have to start to do this. Now we look at the celebrity coach, and we made six figures for this. and I'm retiring in Dubai, and look at me, how great I am. But yet, buy my thingy and whatever it is, and it's a spin-off. The situation with the manosphere is that most of the things from an observation post that I have is that it's all to make money. I don't think they're interested in this kid's problem, to be honest, Dan. I don't think they're actually given 2 cents for the difficult situation that these kids find themselves in. We're talking about Andrew Tate. I don't know the guy, so I can't judge, but it looks like the father figure's always missing in these people's life. There's always this tragedy that happened in their life, and they're not the people that they are actually pushing these kids to go onto this sort of podcasts and stuff. They seem not to have dealt with the problem themselves, but yet they're quite happy to say, "Oh, I can solve your issues. Hey, I give you the pill, and tomorrow you wake up, and all of a sudden, boom, everything is gone." So, in that sense, I think it's a real shame that this has become, and in a world where social media is so strong, it's inevitable that it has become like that. I just want to put a little parenthesis on what Greg said. I'm glad that you did have the telephone when I was young. I didn't even have a computer because, at 58, I mean, it started in the year 2000 when we started to have phones and all sorts of things. So I didn't live my life in the way that perhaps Dan lives his life today, where social media has become part of his universe. Um, and I say that probably the reason why, as a coach, an observer, because you need to be able to, every single time you get to a session, you learn. Every single time you talk to a client, you grow. Every single time you make a difference, there's something happening within yourself, which is absolutely amazing. Money cannot buy that. It isn't, you can't. Um, so I think that from my perspective, social media and AI, particularly because I, like everybody else, uses it. I have, because I knew what happened before, I have a benevolent sort of thinking about it, because I can use it and I can leave it. I can go into it, but I can still live my life without. And I have been living most of my life without it. Where it becomes extremely interesting, and I'm not saying in a negative way, it could be positive, is what effect it will do to my kids of tomorrow, where their relationship is based on social media, their friendship is based on social media, their news is based on social media, their kinesthetic experience about the world seems to be coming particularly from social media, and not from getting out there, and look at the sky and a sunset and go and meet someone that you like and have that experience of feeling, the look, the smile, the smell, all that thing is gone in many ways. So how do you then, um, what would effect this could have over a period of years when you become a little bit more adult, and therefore as an adult man perhaps, or a woman in that sense, the world has changed, you're changing, and social media is not going to back that up. It's not going to give you a pill to feel better about yourself. It doesn't have that option.
Yeah, I agree. And the one thing that's going to make that worse is AI as well. We've only got a few minutes left, right? And then I'm going to hand over the last part to Dan. Something you said something about Andrew Tate. I'll say something about Andrew Tate. He has a coaching program based on drop shipping. I'll tell you something about Dan Bilzerian, who's probably another one, a big one in this manosphere, coaching program. Andy Elliott, coaching program. Okay. The
All
list
of
just
them.
goes on and on and on, on and on and on. And it's unbelievably, and it, like Dan said, they're very good and very precise with their messaging, right? Something about Andrew Tate. He was on a program in the UK called Love Island, right? A long time ago in his 20s, before he was a kickboxing champion, right? Very different guy. I'm not quite sure that is the guy that he actually is. I think that he's been mentored and taught to do that, to pick on I know it's a mad way to say it, a very precise audience, a niche of men that are looking for someone like that. Interesting stuff. I can't be sure, but from the more I see the marketing space and the coaching space, I think that's what he's done. And that leads me on to a question for you, Dan. We had a good chat before the show on coaching with Roberto. Where's the best place for him to dive deep in this, right? And Dan, just before you answer this, a big part of this episode, right, of the show is to motivate other coaches. 90% of coaches quit or fail, only 10% make it. And sometimes I think that's because they don't quite have the skills or the techniques of where to do it, right? So Roberto's got a great message, an amazing coaching, project, program, right, Dan, right? But what would you do with it if you had to take this as a project? Where would you market it? How would you do it? What hooks would you use? And hopefully this will inspire someone just like Roberto, who's looking from the outside thinking, right, where do I go with this message? How do I turn that message into a business? How would you do it?
It's a big question. I think, as you said before we started, Reddit is a very underrated option. Personally, I don't use it. There are millions of people that do, and it's a great place to really call out problems. So, what questions people are having, you need to know that, because these big gurus, they are marketers. They know what questions people are having. The issue is they're leading them the wrong way, the wrong solution, the wrong path. So, if you could lead them to your solution, you've got a business, and that's how it works. And as you said, I think people, the gurus, they don't care about the actual solution itself. They care about making the money. But if you could care about making an impact, helping people, and use that to fuel you, I guess, and call out these problems, articulate them as well as those gurus do. It's just a case of doing that. Reddit's a great place for that. Twitter's also a great place for calling out those problems, and kind of solving like the surface level of them, so that they think, okay, yeah, he actually understands what I'm going through. Maybe I could click on his website. Maybe I could book a call with him. And that's
Amazing.
ultimately what it is.
Yeah, amazing. Guys, we have to wrap it up now, unfortunately. Roberto, thank you so much for joining us. If anyone's interested in your coaching, where's the best place to find you?
Again, I would say coaching with Roberto, www.coachingwithroberto.com. I think it's the best place to look at, because then you can form your own opinion before you make that call. And I think I would say for anyone, if you want to coach, don't get anyone. Just go for it, study it, have a look at it, see what's around, and choose the right one. And then have a chat with this person and see if that person can really give you what you're looking for. So, yeah.
Great message. Roberto, thank you so much for joining us. And for everyone who's watching, remember, whatever you do, don't fall into the coach trap.